Attention! A real story verified by a team specializing in the paranormal, with testimonies, images, and received documents. Proceeding may shock or disturb you and affect your emotional and mental state. Watch at your own risk.
Police Case 2021 to 100847. The unexplained story of the Riverside Babysitter.
My name is Sarah. Or at least that was the name I used before all of this happened. Today, 3 years later, I still wake up in the middle of the night with the sound of phones ringing. Phones that no longer exist in my house. What I'm about to tell you happened on a cold October night in 2021 in Riverside, a seemingly quiet little town in California. A night that forever changed the way I see shadows, how I hear silence, and how I understand that sometimes terror doesn't come from outside, but from within our own reality. This story is not fiction. It is documented with the Riverside Police Department under case number 2021-0847. The recordings of the calls still exist in police archives. The technical reports confirm every detail I am about to relate, and I carry the invisible scars of a night that science could never explain. At that time, I was 19 years old and desperate for money to pay for college. When I saw the advertisement on the campus bulletin board, babysitter needed for one night, generous pay, it seemed like the answer to my prayers. How wrong I was. The house was at the end of Maple Street, a quiet road where Victorian houses stood like silent sentinels against the darkened sky. Number 1247 was a 2-story building, with ornate verandas and windows that looked like empty eyes watching the deserted street. When I arrived at 6 p.m. sharp, a thin fog began to form among the trees, giving the neighborhood an almost ghostly appearance. The homeowners were the Morrison couple, she an elegant woman in her mid-30s with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and he a businessman who spoke too fast and avoided direct eye contact. They were getting ready for a friend's wedding anniversary party and would be back around midnight. Mrs. Morrison quickly showed me around the house. The living room was cozy, with antique furniture and a fireplace that wasn't lit, despite the cold outside. The kitchen was immaculate, almost unused, and there was a strange feeling that everything was too perfectly placed, like a prepared set. The children are already asleep upstairs, she explained, going up a wooden staircase that creaked softly under our feet. Tommy is 8 and he's in the blue room, and little Emma, who is 5, sleeps in the pink room. They are angels. They never wake up during the night. Something in the way she said never wake up gave me a slight chill, but I ignored it. I needed that money. On the second floor, the hallway seemed longer than it should have been. The bedroom doors were ajar, and I could see the small forms of the children sleeping peacefully in their beds. A hallway lamp cast long shadows on the walls, creating shapes that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly. "The house phone is on the living room table," Mr. Morrison said, coming downstairs with me. "For any emergency, you call the police. Oh, and Sarah." He paused and looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "If the phone rings, just be careful." Before I could ask what he meant, they were already grabbing their keys and heading for the door. Mrs. Morrison gave me one last look. There was something like pity in her eyes, as if she knew something I didn't. And then, I was alone in that silent house, where the only sound was the hypnotic ticking of an old clock on the living room wall. For about an hour, everything remained normal. I settled on the living room couch, studying for a psychology exam while watching TV with the volume low. The wall clock struck 8:15 p.m. when I noticed the first sign that something wasn't right. It was an almost imperceptible sound coming from the second floor, as if someone was walking very slowly down the hallway. I paused the TV and listened attentively. Nothing. Just the heavy silence of the house. It must be one of the kids turning over in bed, I thought, trying to convince myself. I went back to studying, but something had changed in the atmosphere. The air seemed denser, colder. I pulled the blanket closer and noticed that my breath was visible. Strange, considering the heating was on. It was 8:47 p.m. when the phone rang for the first time. Ring. Ring. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. My heart pounded. I wasn't expecting any calls. Maybe it was Mrs. Morrison checking if everything was okay. I answered on the third ring. "Hello?" Silence. But not an empty silence, like it was a charged silence, as if someone was on the other end, just listening. Hello? Is anyone there? Then I heard it. A low, controlled breath. Deliberate. Who is this? My voice came out higher than I would have liked. The line went dead for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Then a voice, low, distorted, almost whispered, said just 4 words that chilled me to the bone. You look very pretty. I immediately hung up the phone, my hand trembling. How could someone know what I looked like? I ran to the living room window and looked outside. The street was empty, enveloped in the fog that had grown thicker. The streetlights created pale circles of yellowish light, but between them, there was only darkness. I tried to calm down. It must have been a mistake, some lunatic who dialed the wrong number. But as I walked back to the couch, I could have sworn I saw a curtain move on the 2nd floor, even though there was no wind. And the phone rang again. This time I let the phone ring. Ring, ring, ring. The sound echoed through the house like a desperate scream. On the 5th ring, it stopped. The silence that followed was even more disturbing than the noise. My hands were clammy with cold sweat as I walked around the living room, trying to think rationally. I went upstairs to check on the children, more out of a need to move than out of real concern. On the 2nd floor, every creak of the old wood seemed amplified in the silent house. Tommy and Emma were sleeping deeply, deeper than I would have expected for such young children. But they were fine, breathing normally, safe in their rooms. When I returned to the living room, the phone was ringing again. This time I answered on the 1st ring. Hello? The children sleep so soundly, don't they? The same distorted voice, but now with a cruelly amused tone. You just checked on them. My blood ran cold. How could he know that? Who are you? What do you want? You're wearing a blue shirt today. It looks good on you. I looked down. I was indeed wearing a blue shirt. I ran to the living room window and looked outside, desperate to find someone watching me. The street was completely empty, shrouded in fog. The line went dead. My heart was beating so fast I could hear my own pulse. I tried to calm down, but the phone rang a 3rd time before I could fully process what was happening. You're scared. The voice now sounded closer, more real. I can hear your accelerated breathing. You should sit on the couch. You're getting dizzy. He was right. My legs were shaking so much I had to lean on the arm of the couch. Stop it! I screamed into the phone. I'm calling the police. Do it, Sarah. But while you wait... A terrible pause. I'll still be here, watching you. How do you know my name? How do you... Now you're wondering how I know all this. You're looking around, searching for cameras, searching for explanations. Each word was an icy whisper that pierced my soul. But you won't find anything, Sarah. You'll never find anything. The line went dead, but this time I immediately called the police. 911, what's your emergency? Please, I need help. My voice came out in desperate sobs. I'm babysitting and someone is calling me, threatening me. He knows things he shouldn't know. He can see me. Calm down, ma'am. What's your name and location? Sarah Martinez. I'm at 1247 Maple Street, Riverside. All right, Sarah. I'll send a patrol car. Did this man threaten to harm you directly? Before I could answer, the house phone rang again. My blood turned to ice. Sarah? Sarah, are you there? He's calling again. I whispered desperately into my cell phone. Don't answer, stay on the line with me. But the phone kept ringing. Ring, ring, ring. The sound pierced my head like needles. Finally, I couldn't bear it anymore and answered. You called the police. The voice was even more distorted, almost unrecognizable as human. Very clever, Sarah, but they can't help you. The police are coming, I screamed, still holding my cell phone in my other hand. Sarah? The operator's voice sounded distant on my cell phone. Sarah, are you still there? I'm here, I replied to the operator, but kept the house phone to my ear. Do you know what the problem is, Sarah? The voice on the house phone continued, now whispering almost hypnotically. The problem is they'll never believe you, because when they check the recordings, when they trace those calls... Sarah, the police operator sounded more urgent. I need you to keep that person on the line for at least a minute. We can trace the call if it lasts long enough. My heart raced. A chance to find out who was doing this to me. Keep talking, I whispered into the house phone, trying to sound less terrified than I was. Oh, you want me to continue? A chilling laugh echoed. How clever! You want them to trace me, don't you? 60 seconds to find out where I'm coming from? How did he know? 45 seconds, Sarah! Sarah! The operator yelled into the cell phone. Keep him talking! 30 seconds, the voice continued, as if counting down to something terrible. 15 seconds, Sarah. Are you ready for the truth? 5, 4, 3, 2... Sarah! The operator yelled into the cell phone. We got it! The trace is complete! There was a terrible pause. Then, the operator's voice completely changed, becoming cold and professional. Sarah, you need to get out of the house. Now. Why? Did you find him? The calls. The operator's voice trembled. Sarah, the calls are coming from inside the house, from the upstairs phone. The house phone was still in my hand. The voice whispered one last time. Surprise. I hung up both phones and ran to the front door. My hands were shaking so much I could barely turn the doorknob. When I finally got out, the cold night air hit my face like a slap, but I had never felt so relieved to breathe fresh air. The police car arrived 3 minutes later. 3 minutes that felt like hours as I waited on the sidewalk, nervously looking at the dark windows of the second floor. Officers Ramirez and Thompson were thorough. They searched every inch of the house, basement, attic, closets, under the beds. They checked all the windows, all the doors. There were no signs of forced entry, no forced locks, no broken windows. The back and front doors were locked exactly as I had left them. The children? I asked, still in shock. They're fine, Officer Ramirez said. Still sleeping. Didn't even stir when we entered their rooms. What they discovered was even more disturbing. The upstairs phone, an old device in the hallway, had been disconnected from the wall for months. Mrs. Morrison later confirmed that they never used that phone, that the line had been canceled when they installed the extension in the living room. But the calls came from there, Officer Thompson insisted, checking the records over the radio. The trace is unequivocal. House number, upstairs extension. They brought in technicians. They checked the electrical wiring, the phone line, looked for transmission devices, hidden cameras, anything that could explain how someone could have made those calls or known details about me. Nothing. The call recordings were analyzed by the state's top audio experts. The voice was subjected to digital analysis, comparison with criminal databases, noise filtering. Conclusion: real human voice, but impossible to identify due to deliberate distortion. The case was officially opened as telecommunications harassment and trespassing, but 3 years later, it remains unsolved. The police report is 47 pages of investigations, testimonies, and technical analyses. All confirm the same impossible thing. The calls really happened, coming from a phone that didn't work, inside a house where no one else was present. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison never hired a babysitter again. They moved 6 months later. And I could never again be alone in a silent house without feeling like someone was watching me. In the months that followed that night, my life slowly fell apart. I changed my number 3 times. I moved apartments twice. But the terror followed me like a shadow. Every time a phone rang, any phone, my whole body would panic. My heart would race, my hands would sweat, and for a few terrifying seconds, I was back in that room, hearing that voice whisper my name. I dropped out of college. How could I concentrate on my studies when every sudden sound made me jump? How could I sleep knowing that there are things in this world that logic cannot explain? I went to therapy for 2 years. Dr. Williams was a kind man who tried to convince me that there was a rational explanation for it all. Maybe someone had hacked the phone system. Maybe it was a cruel prank by someone with advanced technical knowledge. Maybe I had imagined some details due to extreme stress, but I knew what had happened. And more importantly, the police knew too. What haunts me are not just the memories of that night. It's the certainty that I will never know who or what was on the other end of that line. It's the reality that there are forces in this world that operate beyond our comprehension, that can observe us, know us, terrorize us, without ever fully revealing themselves. Today, 3 years later, I work in an office during the day and avoid being alone at night. I don't have a landline at home. When my cell phone rings, I still feel my stomach clench for a fraction of a second. Sometimes, on very quiet nights, when the world is sleeping and I'm awake trying not to think, I swear I can hear a phone ringing somewhere in the distance. A sound that comes from nowhere, but echoes inside my head as a persistent reminder that that night really happened and that maybe, just maybe, it's not over. Because the truth is, we never found out who made those calls. And that means whoever it was is still out there. This is my story. A story that is documented, verified, and remains unexplained to this day. Riverside Police Department case 2021-Q847 remains open, awaiting new evidence that may never appear. Now I ask you, what would you do if you were in that house? If the phone rang in the middle of the night and a voice on the other end knew intimate details about your life? If the police confirmed that the calls came from an impossible place, would you believe in logic, or would you trust the terror you felt in your own skin? If this story has made you uneasy, if you're going to think twice before answering the phone tonight, give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to know that the world is much more mysterious than we imagine. And tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced something that science cannot explain? Have you ever felt like you were being watched without being able to see who was watching you? Your stories could be the next video on this channel. But be careful. Sometimes talking about these experiences makes them come back. If you've made it this far, if my story has touched you in some way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because every week I bring real stories like this. Stories that will make you question everything you think you know about reality. And now, when you turn off this video and are alone in the silence of your homes, pay attention to the sounds around you. Because we never know who or what might be watching us. Until next time, if there is a next time.